We're super excited about this panel on state and local solutions to climate change. I'm going to let the moderator, Jeanine Behr Getz, introduce the panelists in just a minute. But as an overview, so as state and federal lawmakers look to rebuild the economy in the wake of COVID-19, we're presented with a unique opportunity to put climate resiliency and the rapid transition to a just, equitable, and low carbon economy at the center of our recovery efforts. In Connecticut, the efforts to advance public policies that support the state's greenhouse gas emissions reduction goals have been slow. Today, we're going to learn more about the national and state trends, opportunities, and barriers to business supporting policy that addresses the climate crisis. Take it away, Janine.
Good morning or good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Heather and the Connecticut Sustainable Business Council for inviting us and our panelists. It's my pleasure to open up this discussion on state and local solutions to climate change. We find ourselves federally and state and locally, lawmakers and businesses looking to reimagine, reinvent, and reinvigorate our economy. So we're taking this time during this discussion with our panelists to discuss opportunities and barriers, as Heather had said, to rebuild our economy, look at sustainability, look at resilience, look at what barriers and issues that our businesses are facing, and how lawmakers and businesses can work together to create a healthier, thriving, sustainable economy for Connecticut and beyond. So I just want to preview what we look like today. We have 45 minutes together. The first 3 to 5 minutes for each panelist to describe trends that they're seeing at a national level, a local level, and then through the eyes of businesses. Our first panelist is Dominic Frongillo, and he's the co-founder of Elected Officials for Protect America, and that's an organization that works with state and local officials to address environmental challenges and climate change. Our second speaker is State Senator Christine Cohen from the 12th District. She is the co-chair of the Environment Committee Connecticut in Hartford. She's also the founder of the Coastal Caucus, which is a bipartisan group addressing challenges facing coastal and waterway communities in Connecticut. She's a local business owner as well. And our third speaker and panelist is Pesce, and he's the president of the Connecticut Food Association, which represents 250 members, businesses in Connecticut that are on the front lines of not only reviving the economy for their stores and their consumers, but also looking at ways to be more resilient going forward. So each panelist is going to have 3 to 5 minutes to discuss what they're seeing, what trends they're seeing, obstacles, challenges, and the purpose of this discussion is to see how businesses and lawmakers can come together to build a healthier and stronger economy and address climate change at the same time, so we're all sustainable in the long run and thriving. So I'm going to turn it over to Dominic, and then at the last 15 minutes, we're going to open it up to the audience for questions that Heather will be posting as we go. So I'm going to open up to Dominic first, and then to Senator Cohen, and then to Wayne. So thank you for joining us again, and thank you to the Connecticut Sustainable Business Association.
Great, thank you so much. Hey everyone, welcome, and thank you for joining. Super excited to be here together with you in these most interesting of times, and have an opportunity to chat a little bit about some of the opportunities that we have working together between policymakers. Just a little bit about myself. I'm a served for 8 years, Caroline, New York, deputy supervisor and council member, and had the opportunity to work with elected officials around the state when the issue of fracking came to New York. We can tell that story a bit later. Suffice it to say, our town mobilized, and we organized 1,000 elected officials across the state as the movement for a ban against fracking played out in town after town across the state. And we organized the voices collectively of 1,000 elected officials, bipartisan, all 62 counties, to call on New York State to keep fossil fuels in the ground, and won. And New York became the first state in the country to ban fracking on public health grounds. And since then, we've grown coast to coast. So I want to chat a little bit today about, can folks see my screen? Okay, cool. About some of the opportunities and barriers for businesses in particular to work together with policymakers on supporting bold policy. Always helpful to zoom out to the big picture. Welcome to Earth. This is where we live. And this is the only place in the universe that supports human life that we're aware of. So it's useful to know some of the metrics. Deep dive. A lot of you have probably seen this data. This is ice core data going back 800,000 years. CO2 on the top, temperature on the bottom. People notice that the graphs, they fit together, they go up together, they're non-linear, but it fits within the stable temperature bound and these stable CO2 concentrations, which are in parts per million. But right now, we have dramatically exceeded, this is as of yesterday, the CO2 concentration in the atmosphere for 11. And that's not the whole story. If I like to say, if CO2 is like a spicy chili powder because it's so powerful and concentrated in the atmosphere that parts per million can have this kind of impact on the climate, then methane is like Dave's insanity sauce. And because it's just a super powerful, super concentrated greenhouse gas. And this is currently the level of methane in the atmosphere, which really scares me because of all of the mass extinctions on planet Earth. 4 of the 5 of the ones, except for the current one, were caused by, or were preceded by a spike in methane. So this is something that we all need to take pretty seriously here. Great. In terms of the good news, though, we are seeing that the energy is really, when compared to fossil fuels, has really come down quite a lot. Jobs, there's now 5 times as many solar jobs as in coal. So these are really encouraging trends. Even accounting for the pandemic, clean energy jobs have grown five times as fast as fossil fuel jobs. We're seeing energy storage, capacity, which can support electrification of the grid, increase dramatically. Electric cars, if you look at some of the policies globally, will hit price parity in the US in just 2 years, which is pretty amazing for large cars and SUVs. Tesla, many of you have seen the electric road, not the Roadster, but the long haul truck, which can go 300 to 500 miles on a single charge as a range. And we finally have been able to decouple our economy from CO2 emissions. So this is really encouraging and gives us all an opportunity to see, okay, how can we accelerate that? So that's really the question we want to answer, and just the perspective that we come from as elected officials, current and former elected officials across the country working together. This was, working aside Mark Ruffalo. You are going to win when you have an actual superhero on your side. And our model here, kind of in terms of policy change, is something that might be helpful to kind of think about. We convene the champions, those elected officials that are truly leading the charge on dealing with the climate crisis, and for them to do peer-to-peer organizing with their peers to then engage the early majority. Because once you do that, it just hits a tipping point as the late majority then needs to come on board. And we've seen this with issue after issue, fracking in New York as an example, the Land and Water Conservation Fund, which we organized as well in partnership with many of you that were advocating for that to protect public parks. In California, just this past month, California declaring a ban on fossil fuel powered vehicles by 2035, and issues on divestment as well. So in terms of what's the role that business can play, bringing forward your voice in support of national climate policy and state climate policy, working with ASBC affiliates, including Connecticut Sustainable Business Council, to advance ongoing policy efforts, and then training your employees in advocacy and lobbying. That last piece is actually really important. As as we'll hear later, lawmakers constantly get lobbied by those interests that are, let's say, high carbon interests. ALEC, for example, at the national level, lobbying heavily in different states and nationally, are organizing conservative lawmakers to basically block at every opportunity good policies, adding extra solar taxes, ensuring that there's no streamlined regulations for clean energy. And so actually training your employees to lobby lawmakers is actually really important to help balance that out and to be a force for and a constant voice within the legislatures. So this is my co-founder, Alex, and president. If you want to get in touch with us, would love to talk with you. I guess just one last thought is, from a millennial perspective, now millennials, you may have seen the research, are now 71% of millennials say that environmentally friendly business practices are important for them in deciding which businesses to support with their dollar, vote for with their dollars. So really leveraging that storytelling that in your brand really helps change the narrative too, and kind of build the support for these policies. With that, I'll stop there, and I'm excited to pass on to the next panelist.
Yes, thank you, Dominic. And that brings up an important part as we go into Senator Cohen's as well as ESG. Many of the investors and analysts are making their vote when they start investing in companies that have strong environmental, social, and governance commitments. So Senator Cohen.
Hi, thanks so much. Excited to be here, and thank you, Dominic. I learn something new all the time, and it's really great hearing from you. So I am, as Janine said, I'm State Senator Christine Cohen. I represent the 12th District here in Connecticut, encompassing Branford, North Branford, Madison, Guilford, Durham, and Killingworth. So 3 coastal towns, as well as 3 towns rich in agricultural heritage, where the environment is certainly of utmost importance. I live with my 3 beautiful children and husband in Guilford. I am a small business owner, as Jeanine also mentioned, of 17 years. Prior to that, I worked at many Fortune 500 companies, most recently Connecticut's own Stanley Black & Decker, where I learned a tremendous amount about the entire supply chain, starting with operations and manufacturing. Also worked on the consumer end as a marketing manager in their hand tools division, and was actually thrilled to see a couple of speakers from Stanley Black & Decker on other panels today, and their efforts towards environmental sustainability. Well, I haven't worked in environmental policy for long. Taking care of our Earth for future generations has certainly been of particular interest to me. I recognize, as many of you do, that we have an existential crisis on our hands, and we must act now. Hearing Dominic talking about the methane spike and the potential for a 6th extinction is, really dramatic and frightening. So dramatic solutions must be acted upon so that our Earth is viable for future generations. I think environmental policy first started getting my attention during the Clinton administration in particular, and thereafter, when Al Gore subsequently launched a campaign for climate action and his documentary that many of us are familiar with, An Inconvenient Truth. It's really the first time that I remember having serious conversations about what we're going to do for our planet and what the future looks like, with this rapid pace of global warming. Fast forward many years, and I've become the chair of the Environment Committee of the Connecticut General Assembly. I take my cues on legislation and policy change from the experts, because I could never profess to be one on this subject matter. So we rely heavily on, advocacy from organizations like Dominic's there. I listen, learn, and I advocate, and, We've been seeing a tremendous amount of work going on at the state level with respect to mitigation of climate change. I'm sure we'll get into a lot more of it in a little bit, but we've been incredibly focused on waste mitigation efforts, working to take a hard look at the decisions of the past and what needs to be done to really improve our future. You know, is single stream recycling working, for example? I'd say not. You know, we have a bottle bottle deposit system in Connecticut. What can we do to improve redemption rates and get bottles and cans out of the single stream for, you know, a cleaner, truly recyclable product? We're looking at anaerobic digesters and organic separations, you know, as current statute is really limited to a certain radius and tonnage. You know, as Jeanine mentioned as well, you know, as a shoreline legislator, sea level rise is of particular concern to the communities that I represent. It's what prompted me to create a coastal caucus of the legislature, which I now chair with Representative Behr, who I also believe was a panelist today for this summit. You know, I knew how much information I was gathering and learning representing my community, and I wanted other legislators to be just as aware and informed so that when we are reviewing these proposals, we could have real data to help in our deliberation processes. You know, having knowledge and understanding really creates ideas as well. And so the hope is that many progressive legislative concepts arise from our caucus. And we were able to pass a bill that was born actually out of my district, from one of the towns that I represent, which was an act creating a coastal resiliency reserve fund, which is really enabling legislation, providing towns with investment authority to set up accounts that are earmarked for sea level rise mitigation and disaster cleanup. You know, and we're working constantly on trying to figure out what we can do to really incentivize business to do more with respect to the environment. And a lot of that goes along with some of these waste mitigation efforts that I mentioned. But most recently, we just passed a bill on environmental justice, which is really important, and really getting businesses thinking about, you know, from the onset, you know, what they're going to do, how they're going to integrate into the community, what their carbon output looks like, and how do they you know, create community benefits agreements so that they're working in concert and hopefully not putting more carbon into our atmosphere. So I'll stop there because I think we probably have a lot of, you know, a lot to get through today in a very short amount of time. And I'll turn it over back to you, Jeanine. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Senator Cohen. I know that there are many questions to be coming forward too for you. So thank you very much. And Wayne, do you want to take over and from a business perspective as far as what challenges and what you're seeing and trends? So welcome.
Sure. Hi, Jeanine. Hi, Senator Cohen. How are you? Nice to see you. Hello, Dominic, and all the attendees. I'm going to attempt to share my screen shortly. I'll have my daughter come in and make that switch shortly. I just wanted to say a quick hello and talk a little bit about the Food Association and some of the work that we're doing, and then get real specific on a program that I think might be of interest to the group. So the first thing is we have 5 strategic pillars that we engage our members and our association in: economic development, nutrition and wellness, community service, and next generation leadership within our industry. But we're here to talk about one of our 5 core pillars, which is environmental stewardship. And that kind of dovetails right into a lot of the work that we do. We do work on hazardous waste disposal, single-use plastic bags, Senator. Great, you know, that's our thing. I know we got that done, but that's, you know, we engage there. We collect over 600 million containers a year that are then recycled back. So we're a big part of the reclamation of bottles, cans, and other things that are brought back into the system and recycled. We have food initiatives. It's interesting. The senator mentioned some of the quantum biopower is one of our members, but most people don't know that Stop and Shop actually takes back 350 million tons of their own food waste from every store in Connecticut and digests that to run their distribution facility up in Massachusetts. So they're taking back all of their food waste from their stores and taking that back and turning that into energy. So we're working really hard across that front, on food waste. We've retrofitted all our stores with LED lights. We have the most efficient lighting in Connecticut stores in the country. Our optimization of refrigeration is world class. All of that work is being done, but what I'm going to share the screen with you and talk to you about something that we've been working on for the last 6 or 7 months with one of our members. Oh, good, I got it. All right, so I just want to make sure that comes up. Yeah. Did that come up yet, Janine? Is that on this? Not yet.
Yeah,
Right.
it's up.
Okay, so you can see the little presentation up there, right?
Yeah.
So over the last several years, I've been on a work group with a bunch of insurance companies and state departments regarding resiliency. And this really stemmed from 2000, I think it was 2013 when Sandy came through and a lot of the communities were decimated on the shoreline. And we were looking for ways to make sure that we didn't make some of the same mistakes that we had made, leading up into Sandy. So for example, I can tell you, we had one retail member who had 91 stores, but 9 generators. So every single one of those stores was out of power. Anybody who wanted groceries for a period of 6 to 8 days really was going to have a problem just getting food for their families. So that really kind of shined an important light on resiliency and being able to keep our stores open when things get really difficult out there for people to go out and shop. So most of our members today, since Sandy, have invested in equipment in fossil fuel generators. So when we had this last storm that just happened, we were in pretty good shape. I mean, I would tell you we were probably about 50% open in the state, and another 50% of our stores were actually down. Again, because the electricity went out and not all of our stores had fossil fuel generators. So we've been working with the former Speaker of the House, who is a consultant for a company called Amerizone. I think most of you folks on the phone, or most of you folks on the call, know Brendan Sharkey. He runs a company called Amerizone. They are a CFA member. And what Brendan and I have been doing is taking this concept to all of our members around how do we stay resilient with battery power in terms of the next big power outage. So this is a presentation that we put together for some of our members, and we've been showing them this presentation. And really, from a grocer standpoint, there are a couple things that concern us when the lights go out. The first thing is are we resilient? Can we open up? How quickly can we get back in business? But we also have the highest energy costs in the country as well. So, what things can we do to mitigate some of those costs on a daily basis when there's not a storm or there's not some, type of event that has caused us to need to go to battery backup power? How can we save money as well? So there's really a two-pronged approach here. So obviously, we lose a lot of product and we lose business when we're out of business. But we're also an essential service. And I think the pandemic really kind of brought that out as well. I can't begin to tell you, I worked harder in 30 days than I did in 30 years through the pandemic.
Yeah.
It was insane. We had panic buying, we had food shortages, meat shortages, we had regulations and safe store rules. There was just a lot going on. And really, it was all designed around trying to keep people safe, trying to keep our associates safe, trying to keep customers safe. But we learned a lot from that experience, and we've learned a lot from Sandy in the last couple of mega storms as well. So the question becomes, what are we doing to get out in front of that? And I think that's more important than, the post-mortem. The question becomes, what do we do going forward? So this is just some information on energy costs and, how they're paid and how we pay Eversource and demand times and total kilowatts and all of those things are added together. And, because grocery stores have so much refrigeration and are constantly in use 24/7, we probably have the highest cost of any energy bill payer in the state of Connecticut as well. So how do we mitigate some of those costs? But more importantly, how do we get to a zero-based carbon solution is really where we're trying to get to. So we just did a quick, battery power versus generator power scenarios to say, okay, does it supply backup power? Is there a daily reduction use that's available? Is there a demand charge reduction? Is there a utility peak incentive, renewable energy incentive? All of these things, that air and noise pollution, that we could do and say and go convince our members that this technology is evolving, emerging. It's better than it was 5 years ago. It's going to be better 3 years from now than it is today. How do we get into the game? That's the play. That's where we're trying to push them into the pool. And then, again, this is a little information on some of the newest technology that's out there around batteries. We have high usage. So like if you think about, you go around your yard and you put your battery in your blower or your battery in your hedge clipper. We're talking about, this is much different storage, much different capacity, but it's the same concept. It's just a bigger battery. So, we want to try to figure out ways to get to these, how do we power a 500 kilowatt system without having to use a diesel powered generator? And that's basically the road that we're on. And then this is just some information around, demand charges and response programs that are available. But at the end of the day, Senator, you're on the phone. This is going to be really important as we go to Pura and we solicit funds, just like we did for quantum biopower. We would not have the digester in Southington, Connecticut that we have today had there not been, resiliency grant, our program grants around that. And the same thing with this battery storage. Unless there's Pura grants and things that equal the playing field, battery power needs to be as cost efficient as a generator. And then that allows our people to make that decision and say, no, I'm going to go with the battery power because we know that makes more sense from a carbon footprint standpoint, but the costs need to be there. And that's kind of where we're at today, which is trying to convince folks to put incentives around battery power, so that in the end, we can go out and make those choices and be resilient when the time is right for consumers in the state of Connecticut. And then I'll let it go there.
Thank you, Wayne. And those are all great points, and certainly talking about energy and resiliency and opportunity. And so the question that has come in from a few people that I've spoken to in preparation for this panel is, how are businesses working together with governments and policymakers and lawmakers? What barriers are there? What challenges are there? What opportunities are there? And how do we get together on what we agree on first, as opposed to what we're not agreeing on? So maybe Dominic, you can tackle even battery energy from a trending national perspective of how policymakers or lawmakers and businesses are maybe working together, or what you're seeing. And then Senator Cohen, maybe you can talk about how incentives are being done, or how you prioritize things at the state level for businesses and policies for environmental and, balancing that with economic growth.
Absolutely. I think maybe one way to start with the conversation, and if I'm jumping the gun here to share the resources that are available. There's a report that the American Sustainable Business Council put out on reopening the economy from crisis to opportunity. This recommendations for state and local governments, which really does go into a lot of detail on exactly these questions and what are the specific policies in every area. So that's a really great one as well. I think maybe just to answer the question with a quick story, which is, I mean, we mentioned Sandy, right? So how can businesses work together in the face of a crisis, whether it's an environmental crisis or an economic crisis, to kind of create change? And, one of the, obviously this is Connecticut after the storm, but some businesses, at least in New York, got together with elected officials, and we called on the state to divest from fossil fuels from a pension fund as a key thing, and to shift those funds to clean energy. So as you were talking about, we need to have more funds available. And by having businesses together with elected officials, we were actually able to move Cuomo to be the first governor in the country to support fossil fuel divestment. And within 4 hours of Cuomo's announcement, New York City did an about face after 5 years of dragging their feet and announced, we're going to divest too. And then one-upped it with de Blasio announcing a month later, suing the top 5 oil companies, and Connecticut obviously following suit, pun intended, and suing the oil giants. And this is the kind of thing that can really create that policy change when you get the voices of businesses together with elected officials. We've seen the same thing out in California with the recent fires. Elected officials and businesses standing together saying, hey, this is an economic opportunity, and needing to phase out production and have the subsidies go to clean energy. And Newsom, in response last month, he looks like a used car salesman in this photo. But hey, the policy is pretty solid, kind of tackling demand. So yeah, I would kind of put those out there. And obviously with the Green New Deal, we need a comprehensive policy structure to do that. And I think the recommendations that are laid out in that report about the different specific policies that businesses can push, from incentive programs and financing, which as well as local government, state and local government incentives and support for governments to be able to, especially at the local level, to implement these policies are so important as well. So, and those are all things that are important for the State Environmental Committee to be able to tackle within the legislature. So I really appreciate the senator's comments on that as well.
Yeah, right. And Senator Cohen, maybe even more specifically, how do you prioritize policies against the greenhouse gas emissions reduction that the state has set too? So maybe you talk about that as well.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Janine, and again, thanks, Dominic, for your comments, and Wayne for yours as well, because they all really lead into the need for collaboration amongst legislators and business owners or business managers in determining what the appropriate steps are going forward. There's a tremendous amount of work going on at the state level with respect to mitigation of climate change. And, while I believe we could be taking braver, bolder action, we're certainly making big strides. And I believe we have an administration now here in our state that has placed a large focus on the environment, a larger focus than ever before. And certainly, Janine, as you just mentioned, right out of the gates, the governor announced in 2019 speeding up the date of a zero carbon target to 2040, and then subsequently created the Governor's Council on Climate Change, tasked with really coming up with ways to meet those goals. We've been seeing offshore wind procurement and carbon reduction initiatives in the transportation sector in particular, making sure there's a focus right now on medium weight vehicles and making sure that we get those to a place of zero emissions, in an expeditious manner. As I think we really need to be working in concert with one another, and that's the key, making sure that we understand what businesses are needing from us and what the environment most importantly needs from us in order to have an impact on global warming. So I think, to answer your question, I think there's some things that we can do that are actually turn out to be fantastic for businesses, and we need to educate businesses on them. Like, we talked a little bit about organic separation. Some of you may be familiar with the SMART program, which is, reducing monthly trash output. And that actually is a money-saving venture for businesses, but it's, it requires education of the program and how to make it work. And when we're talking about organic separation, while it seems something that might be cumbersome to some businesses, I would venture to say that Stop and Shop is actually saving money by doing that. And if we can get other, investment in bio plants like Quantum, then we can move in that direction where we're getting more and more companies, on board with doing organic separation. And from a legislative perspective, we can do that by creating enabling legislation that helps them, working with municipalities. Sometimes it just is about getting a pulp extractor up and running and then taking that pulp to the main bio plant. Things of that nature can be really helpful, but we have to really all put our heads together. I was just actually very recently at a kelp farm in Connecticut, and with aquaculture, which often gets overlooked, these are cases where actual climate change mitigation is occurring and actually is the business that they're in. So many of these ocean farmers are in the business of cleaning up our waterways, and the seaweed and the oysters are acting as pollutant sponges and filters respectively. And kelp is being used in the creation of new bioplastics and things of that nature. So there's really exciting things that are going on. We just have to figure out what businesses are out there and what those businesses need from us. Do they need regulatory hurdles lifted? In the case of aquaculture, it takes us working with the Department of Agriculture very closely, and what are the roadblocks there that we need to take care of. And again, I mentioned the organics collection, creating legislation that moves that further, that radius out further, and working with municipalities on tax incentives for some of these businesses. So all of this stuff is enabling legislation to motivate and spur ideas, such as the Coastal Resiliency Reserve Fund, even, that I mentioned, or creating the organics collection, and then we can expand from there.
And it's interesting too, because with these new businesses and excitement, and municipalities working with state, and Dominic had mentioned training employees and lobbyists, and for our audience that are all businesses, basically, what are like 3 or maybe 2 steps that they can take to get to your level, the state level, for a policy recommendation or a need? How can they voice their needs? Like, who do they go to voice their needs for economic growth or expansion and policy reform or initiation?
Well, I think it's really important that they have a good relationship with their legislators. So who is your legislator, not only in the town where you're conducting business or multiple towns where you're conducting business, but who is your legislator where your residence is, and getting to know all of those, the more voices, the better, and letting those legislators know that this is important to you. And then certainly even developing contacts on the environment and energy committees is always a good thing, and finding out what's going on and what new initiatives there are. Certainly, I'm in contact with our agencies like the Department of Agriculture and Department of Energy and Environmental Protection on a regular basis, and because I have that information, I can, work in concert with them to, develop programs and talk about those types of incentives. So I think it's just really important to develop a rapport with your legislators. That's the bottom line.
No, that's great. And Wayne, how are your members also looking at energy and carbon reduction, in addition to the battery versus generators? I mean, that's a great issue to bring forward, I would imagine, for all businesses. That transcends just grocers. But what other efforts are they making to maintain sustainability and increase resiliency? Oh, I think you're muted.
I think food waste is something that, we've planted a stake in the ground on. And, we do everything we can before that thing goes to some type of trash hauler. I mean, from composting to donations to, reuse where we can. So I think food waste is a place that we've really dug in on. It reduced costs for us to not have to haul that away. It's generally very heavy and quite expensive. The one thing about business is that they're in business to make a profit. The idea of the circular economy is so critically important, and when the right incentives are put in place for businesses, they'll reach for that ring. And again, I don't want to beat a dead horse here, but at the end of the day, the rationale around quantum biopower was the right incentives were put in place for that business to, take root, put itself in the ground, and now collect, 300, I think it's 300,000 pounds or however many pounds a year of food waste in a 5-mile radius around Southington. Fairfield County's got the largest population in the state of Connecticut. How do we go attack that area, right? How do we fish where the fish are, so to speak? But we're always going to look to figure out ways to grab the ring that makes sense, that A, save us money, B, help us to be good community stewards. And when those things come together, then we've got magic. And sometimes it takes us, and you and I've worked on this issue, to look at things a little bit differently. Mm-hmm. And we need people talking. Forums such as this are so critically important. Those connections with the Environment Committee and people that are making these decisions so that they understand what businesses are going through in the state and what they need from the state to be successful is so critically important. So I really want to say thank you for letting me come on today. But again, it's these types of forums. I learned a lot from Dominic's presentation, and I tuned in a little bit earlier and learned some more from them as well. So I think we need to take our head out of the sand and do what's right for, the state of Connecticut, and keeping this place what it is and making it better for those who come behind us.
Yeah, that's great. I have a question for Senator Cohen, but I also have a suggestion. Perhaps when Senator Cohen, when the Environment Committee is presented with a policy or taking commentary on policies, anyone who comes to the table should say why the policy is good before they say why it's bad. So start with what we agree on and what the impact is economically and environmental, and have those two statements prepared before they say everything that's wrong with it or what have you. But there's a question that just came in for Senator Cohen of how has COVID influenced or shaped policy priorities, and what do we need to keep climate front and center? And we have just a minute left, so sorry to do that to you.
No, that's okay. But I think what we've all recognized globally, without as many cars on the road and as many factories running, is that we saw a tremendous carbon reduction. And how do we continue that? How do we bring that forward? And knowing that it needs to be absolutely prioritized. And I think, as I said, this administration has made it a priority. Well, I also alluded to the fact that I think we could be taking bolder action, especially on the heels of announcements like that of Governor Newsom. I am incredibly pleased that we've taken the actions that we have, and that there is an initiative to do more. The GC3, as it's commonly called, that Governor's Council on Climate Change, has been meeting regularly with the appropriate subgroups in action, and ready to make recommendations for real legislative change. And I'm looking forward to that happening in the next session.
That's great. Well, I want to thank you all for your time and your insights and sharing and having an open discussion with our audience, and kind of 3 takeaways that I have that maybe you guys can nod your heads yes or say yes, or for I love Dominic's of like training your employees on lobbying and how to approach their legislators, and also having an economic and an environmental impact statement associated with any policy or economic growth that you're looking for. And to Wayne's point, as well as having incentives and holding out carrots for economic and new company development, and also sustainability and resiliency going forward, and kind of incentivizing companies to do the same. I know the consumers are doing that. They're voting with their wallets more than ever before. So it's important that our conversations and discussions are, together, open and positive. So thank you all for your time and for your comments and insights, and hopefully we'll have more discussions to come.